get the ball rolling. So we're here for the Restoring Rural Business Series, the day after Memorial Day. I just mentioned how maybe that's why we're looking at just ourselves here, but that's okay. This is sponsored by the Rural LISC program. They gave us a grant to my counterparts and I here at all the community colleges in the most rural counties of North Carolina. You see on the map there, and I'm not going to mention every single school that's involved, but I do appreciate all my counterparts at the other schools being involved and getting that's out there so that people know what we're doing. And for those that don't know, the North Carolina Small Business Center Network is at all the community colleges at all the 58 throughout North Carolina. We've been doing this work for, we're in 30 some odd years now. And with that, you see, we've got this 5-year average looking at the fact that we're trying, our main goal, of course, is an economic development tool is to help businesses start, but also to help create and retain jobs. And we do that primarily through counseling, but we also run seminars now that we're getting back into post-COVID life. We'll start doing stuff face-to-face, but until then, we'll keep doing some of these webinars, and they're very beneficial as well. You can find those on our website here at the training tab, and there's just a ton of other options there. If you get a chance, make sure you click through and you'll see some of the other ones. But do make sure if you are catching this before or after the fact that you contact one of my counterparts. These are the folks in all the different rural counties and communities throughout. Got a couple of changes, so I've got to update this slide for the next one. A couple of our folks have left us and gone to bigger and better things, but we do appreciate them being with us and a lot of the work they've done. And they're still going to be doing stuff in their own county, so I'm not sure. But if you do, if you're in North Carolina, please make sure you catch up with the right person, the right place. We'll make sure that you're hooked up so that we can help you where you're at with the best resources in the area. So our series so far, we've gotten a lot of great material. So if you've got a chance, this is all recorded, and I'll show you the link in just a second. But our presenter today, her partner was here a couple of months ago doing the Get More Customers in the Downtown After 5. And we did tourism best practices back in March, which was very good, and marketing one last month, which was really good. Today we're here doing new rural business options. Next month, I mentioned to our folks earlier that we'll be coming back. I've got a guy on the hook. I hopefully will be able to announce this probably within the next day or so. We'll be on the lookout for that real quick. And our presenter will be back next month for the new Shop Local, which kind of ties with some of the stuff we've already been talking about, which is really fantastic. So we've got a lot of great stuff. For all of this, as I mentioned, you can go to bit.ly/Restore Rural Capital NC. It's all case sensitive to catch everything that we've already done. Go and register, and you can watch all the recordings of all these in the past, and then also the recordings for, I got my slides out of order, but let me quickly jump ahead for that. There it is, the follow-up mastermind brain trust call, which is, and I didn't change the date on my slide, so it's bad on me, but it's this Thursday. If you miss everything today and have questions that come up while we're doing the presentation, make sure you catch back here, and that'll go with the links as well for a follow-up on this. Our presenter this month is Becky McCray, and I'm not going to read her, but just how to read. So I'll let her do her introduction and start my little slides here. But do make sure you hang around till the end and talk a little bit more about the other upcoming stuff and other opportunities. Becky, are you ready to roll?
I am ready.
Oh, I'm going to vacate the video because nobody wants to see it.
Vacate. I'm going to vacate the video. I think that's awesome.
And I will step back and the show is yours.
All right. Thank you so much, Todd. And good morning to everyone. Almost good brunch time, we'll say, because it's about that time of day. And I'm excited to be with you. I am a rural entrepreneur myself all my life. Started my first business in junior high school. And I live in the town, we're not really a town, Hopeton, Oklahoma. There's about 30 people here. We're an unincorporated place. And I'm excited to share with you today. I do want to hear your stories because as we give these examples, I know that ideas will come up for you. I'd love to hear those. Todd, do they have access to the chat box? Have we got a chat going? We do have a chat going.
Yes.
All right.
Yes,
Okay,
they
I'm going
do.
to turn the chat on. All right. And Todd has already told you, if you have questions, pop them in the chat box. And if you're watching this as the recording, then feel free to reach out through Todd and through channels, or you can email me, Becky@saveyour.town. And also, if you have questions and would like to join us Thursday, if you ask your question now as it occurs to you, or if one comes up before Thursday, do join us on that call Thursday, and I can go more into depth into whatever it is that you would like to talk about related to these at that time. So I know that this past year has been this whiplash of ups and downs for businesses. We've had challenges to our local businesses. We've all seen businesses close. New businesses are opening. There's lots of changes in how we do business. And so it's a kind of an exciting time, but also a very scary time to be thinking about starting a new business or to be working on even more pivots, changes, new ideas within your existing business to try to adapt to everything that is going on. We cannot afford at this point to spend years planning things out and saving money and arranging financing and doing all those other things because everything may have changed before we even get going. So if you are one of the people working to improve your community by supporting entrepreneurs, it's a challenging time for you as well. And so you may have to expand where you look for potential entrepreneurs, and you may need to adapt how you help them to help them be the most successful. So outside resources, we've seen a big glut of outside resources from state and federal level right now. The Rural LISC grant that's funding this series is one of those examples, but we know that these will not be around forever. And so we are going to focus on things you can do with what you have right now, whatever that may be, as little as possible. So these are all the cheap and cool ideas that we can do with the fewest resources. Because part of what holds potential new entrepreneurs back is thinking that going into business has to be a big and difficult and long project. Because especially people who aren't in business right now, they have this everyone knows how you go into business in their heads. And so it's like, if you're going to do a retail store, you've got to decide on what your specialty is going to be. You're going to have to figure out exactly what merchandise you might want to carry. You've got to decide or guess whether your town can actually support this and be enough of a market for it to work. You need to find that location and remodel it, or maybe even bring it up to code. You've probably heard horror stories about that. You need to find some suppliers who will actually work with you in a small town and get started with them, which may be a long process. You've got to get your local banking established, secure financing, because you're going to do all of this. You need to hire staff, which is a subject in and unto itself. You've got to figure out all about advertising and marketing and all of that before you even know whether that initial idea you had is actually sound. And so that is kind of this impression that people carry around, that it takes a lot of time, a lot of money, and a lot of work just to get started in business. So I want you to imagine taking some small steps in between those things. So what if you could just buy a few products and test by running a temporary business, maybe inside another business, borrow some space, or maybe you could just rent a small booth at maybe even at an event, just the card table at an event, and you could find out what people react to and how that goes. And then maybe you could step up to a little bit larger space, maybe again inside another business. And if something doesn't work in all of that, you could stop and fix it a lot easier than if you're doing that years of planning method. So from here, jumping up to start a traditional store doesn't seem nearly as hard because you're learning what people want to buy in your market. You've established those relationships with suppliers. You've started gaining that loyal following, selling online, reaching out to people at events. This is your customer base as you get going. And so all of these smaller steps are lifting you up step by step, closer to being able to jump over the hurdle of going into business. And if you miss a jump at a lower step, then it's easier to recover and try something new. And that is the purpose of our innovative rural business models. It is to put you into a position to succeed, or if you're going to fail, to do it in a very manageable way because it was really small. It cuts the time and money off of the process of getting into business. So you can get started much smaller with much less money, much less risk, much less need for traditional financing like loans. And so for those of you that are serving community, these also give you easier ways to support potential entrepreneurs with what's already going on in the community. You can use existing projects, existing events, existing activities as ways to nurture entrepreneurship in your area. So we are going to share. Share. What happened to my share button? All right, so my share button has disappeared and we're going to see why that, there we go. Just made my little window too small. That was my own thing. There we go. Okay, so pardon me for that taking a second, but we're going to talk today about this new way of going into business by taking small steps, the innovative rural business models, and it's tiny, temporary, together, traveling, and technology enabled. So these are what give us that environment for success. So let's do a quick definition for each one of these. So tiny is obviously, rather than expecting all businesses to start out full sized, it's much easier to start something small. Now, we've all seen small businesses like a coffee kiosk or other tiny food places, but it's an idea we can extend to all kinds of businesses, tiny industrial spaces, tiny offices, tiny artist spaces. So starting small takes fewer resources and puts entrepreneurs at less risk of big failures. So if there's one of these that's magic, it's tiny. It's keeping things as small as possible. Right there with that is temporary. So rather than expecting people to start a business and it's permanent and it's going to run for years, sign a full 5-year lease, whatever the permanent definition of a business is, let's just pop up for a weekend at an event. Let's be supportive of things that start just for the holidays. Let's take our idea and find a way to test it just temporarily to see how well it works. So this is, quick market research to check which new ideas work or might work or might not work. So the next part is together. And so rather than focus on only one business at a time individually, start thinking about how could we create a new business inside of an existing business, either just sharing space or as part of that business. So they could be inside or alongside. This could be retailers that go together and share a space. It can be making use of an extra office inside of a service business that they're no longer using. Or maybe it's nurturing a new tiny manufacturer inside of an existing industrial building. The next one is traveling. So rather than expect our businesses to stay put, start in one place, stick in that downtown building, we want to get people where they can tap more than one market. So rural businesses can move around in trucks and trailers and vans and anything with wheels. So we've all seen food trucks, but we've also started to see a lot more retail done from trucks and trailers. And I'm also seeing services and professionals who are hitting the road to gain more clients. And then finally, tech enabled. This has been the biggest revolution throughout my lifetime. And rather than being limited to making sales only within your geographic area, local entrepreneurs like you are using platforms to reach a lot more of a market. And the small businesses that sell online can also buy online. We can get products and services that we need through remote work platforms and even AI-enabled apps. So I want to tell you the story of one business that has used the innovative rural business models to take small steps. And this is from Webster City, Iowa, population about 8,000 people. And Sean Anderson is the fellow that you see here. He loves to make kettle corn. And so he started doing the kind of thing that happens to a lot of entrepreneurs, which is friends wanted more. And so he started selling from his front yard. And then he would just text his friends, hey, the kettle corn is ready. And everyone would come over to his house. And eventually he made a sign and made it for sale to the public. So that's a tiny stage right there, but it's also temporary because that was a great start and he started doing more. So they built the trailer that you see, the silvery looking trailer that says kettle corn, fire and ice, lemon shake up. That's their trailer that they made themselves to go to events. So that's very temporary. And if there's an event going on, they're going to go take advantage of that market and that audience while they're there. And that went so very well that at the end of the summer, it got to be winter. There's not as many events. And so they can't go around and capture people at those events. So Sean went to the city and said, could we just set up in the park on Sundays and sell there? And they said yes. And so he sold some soup and some other alternative things there in the park on Sundays. So another temporary stage, and still pretty small, not traveling as much, but the final step is kind of a big one. At the bottom right, you see this busy coffee shop. That was an existing coffee shop in the town of Webster City that the owner was ready to move on. And so Sean and his wife bought the coffee shop. And so they're not moving around as much. Their kids still run the trailer. So that's still part of supporting the business. And one thing that Sean learned in his process of being at events was that having more businesses together brought more people together, brought more audience. So Sean is sharing that coffee shop space with a local winery that displays and sells product there, and a local photographer who displays their art all over the walls and sells there as well. So tiny, temporary, together, traveling, and I'm sure they're using plenty of technology within their business. So this is an example of using all of those models. And it seems so natural. I mean, you would think everyone would do business this way of, just small step your way into it, start in the yard. From the yard, when he's selling in his yard to his friends, he's not thinking, I'm going to buy the coffee shop. He's thinking, this is going pretty good. I wonder what I could do next. So that's so different from the old way of like, you should go to the entrepreneur boot camp. You should go to the 6-week training course, one business at a time, go big fast, start by buying the coffee shop, get to that business plan, make sure it's really thick. Well, those are not the way that we can do things now. And as things change so quickly, these tiny experiments become really valuable at finding out what will work right now. So we'll spend the rest of our time together today talking about these real world examples of people who are doing things in this tiny, temporary, together, traveling, and tech-enabled way. So what I want you to listen for are the ideas that really spark your interest because they might work for you. Make notes of those. Don't try to capture everything, but the ones that make you excited, be sure to capture those ideas. And I also want you to listen for the different ways these models fit together. Even if I don't mention it, think about the ways that you can see they're using the different models in each separate example. So I want to start with examples. And also, it occurs to me, I've got the chat hidden, so I need to make sure I can see the chat here. I say that, and then it isn't popping up. So you guys may have to holler at me if you don't see that I'm following the chat. Okay, so we're going to start with the Together business model because it is simple and really powerful. You're using the momentum of that existing business to try out an experiment or to get several tiny businesses together so that they can build momentum together. So think about all the businesses in your town that aren't using every square inch of their space. Maybe it's a professional firm that has that old partner's office, or there's an insurance company that has a bunch of dead space in their front room. So imagine tiny new businesses popping up inside of those. And one of our favorite examples for this is called Art on the Walls. And this comes from Goffstown, New Hampshire, which has a population of about 3,000 people. Now, each quarter, they go around and install the artwork from local artists on the walls in area businesses. So, every business has to put something on their walls, and then almost every local artist needs some more places to sell their work. So if you put that together, then you have local art inside of local businesses. It's just dead flat simple, right? And it takes advantage of things that you already have in your community. There are places with walls, there are people with art, and it actually cross-pollinates your artists with some people they don't normally talk to, which are your brick and mortar businesses. So I'd love for you, even if you're not an artist or a brick and mortar, I'd love for you to pick up your pen and to think about another business you might partner with for something they're not using that would help boost your business? So just think about that for a second and see if you can think of an example. Now, if you'd love to see an example of this actually happening in your community right now, just walk into any hair salon because you're going to find that the women who work there are actually independent contractors and entrepreneurs who rent their own booths. And maybe there's somebody like a massage therapist who sees clients in another room. Or look around at all of the product displays, because besides hair care products that may belong to the salon owner, you probably see scarves and candles and jewelry and all kinds of retail stuff on sale there. Those are pop-up temporary businesses, often set up by potential entrepreneurs who are testing out the market, except they don't think of it that way. They're just doing something as this on the side, or it's that little thing I do. So these are tiny businesses, many of them temporary, and it only works because they're together sharing that walk-in traffic. The picture of the headbands that you see on the left, that's a local high school student from my hometown, the big town of Alva, Oklahoma, which is about 8 or 10 miles from here. And there's, about 5,000 people in Alva. Well, that high schooler started making headbands out of her mom's scrap fabric and selling them at the hair salon. That's where I first saw it. She has since expanded, tried new product lines. She's in 3 local stores, and she's raising money for her mission trips. But that's an entrepreneur, isn't it? The picture on the right is from Webster City, Iowa. Again, that's where my colleague Deb Brown is from. And that is actually 2 businesses in one. The salon is one half of the retail space, and the clothing store is the other half, and they split the space. Makes perfect sense. You can also share any business that has square feet that they're not using can expand and add new businesses inside. So I've seen a number of grocery stores, especially in towns where the grocery stores are struggling, where they have gotten creative with this. Gowrie, Iowa, the local grocery store turned over a row to an Ace Hardware affiliate, so that because they had no hardware store in town. And the picture is from Tynesta, Pennsylvania, population 500. And the grocery store leased several rows to the Goodwill because there was no thrift store in town. And this allowed them to add and to fill up some spaces that they could not fill up. Now, I want you to look everywhere for unused spaces that you could take advantage of. And that can even include display windows. This example comes from Durham, North Carolina. So big town for you folks. You guys know it's like 275,000 people. But I know you have in smaller towns coffee shops that have display windows they're not using fully. So that's what they did in this case. They turned a big display window into a small office space and called it the Smoffice. They held a contest to try to find someone that was a tiny entrepreneur that wanted to use that space, and they offered it rent-free for 6 months. Everyone benefited because there was the publicity around the contest. And then the 2 businesses, it ended up being a public relations, advertising, marketing kind of person that took the Smoffice. And so they actually helped the coffee shop, and the coffee shop helped them reach more customers because they were out in public and available. So now that you've heard of this, then you're going to be walking around in your town and go, ooh, that would be a good Smoffice. And ooh, what about over there? So especially when the economy is uncertain, it makes a lot of sense to partner with someone that's got a few square feet of extra space rather than starting something completely separate. So, if you think about it, there's probably a lawyer or a professional firm that has an office that they're no longer using, a partner that's no longer there. Or there's a bunch of empty space in the front of a business that's a service business. They're not using all of it. So if you can think of using all of these different examples that we've gone through of the Smoffice and the salons, all of the spaces you can think of, take a moment and see if you can think of a way you could partner with another existing business. Okay, so there are a lot of benefits to getting businesses to be together like that. It builds connections between the entrepreneurs, and entrepreneurs, we learn best from each other. So when we're in close proximity with each other, then we have opportunities to talk to each other. We can answer questions for one another, come up with ways that we might work together, like the Smoffus in the coffee shop, or we might think of potential customers we can refer to each other. So also when we have a lot of entrepreneurs, or at least two in one location, entrepreneurs can also share experts. So one person knows a great marketer or social media helper. Well, so she'll refer that to other tiny business owners in the same area. Or business experts, like from your community college, can reach people that are working together in the same location. Now, the next subject we're going to go to is tech enabled, because I love technology. And it's been exciting to see how it's enabled us to get beyond the city limits signs. So I want to show you another one. By the way, I'll mention the chat is open and I welcome your questions. And if I can't answer it in depth today, we do have the mastermind call on Thursday and I'll answer you then as well. So our next example from technology. This is Brad Martin. He is a machinist in his garage. He's in a town of about 8,000 people in Iowa. And he owns some of his own machining equipment. And he thought he had a good idea of a product to sell. And it is the item that is at the top right, and that is called the bottle grenade. See, it's a keychain, a multi-tool, a bottle opener, and of course, a fashion statement. And he wanted to raise about $2,500 so he could make these and sell them. Now, it's a very tiny idea, and you might not even think it's a good idea, but all that matters is that Brad takes small steps in testing his idea. And technology helped him to do that because he put the bottle grenade for sale on Kickstarter, which is an online funding platform. And he raised not the $2,500 that he wanted. He raised $42,000 in advance sales of bottle grenades. So that obviously reached way beyond his hometown. So he reinvested some of his profits and came up with the second and third of his products that you see there, the one that's labeled the WTF, that is the wrench that fits. And then the one laying across the center is the smaller version of it. This is your combination pocket wrench, gear tie, pry bar, bottle opener, and keychain. Of course, it comes in the two sizes. So he went back to Kickstarter with his WTF. And again, using the technology, he raised this time twice as much, $85,000 in pre-sales. This guy's a natural entrepreneur, but he's lucky because he has a garage that he can work from. He owns some of his own equipment and he has the money to buy materials to work on things to come up with his prototypes. So imagine how many more Brads are out there selling online. So those of you that support entrepreneurs, think of ways that you could give people small garage-sized spaces for them to work in. And also maybe some shared equipment so that not everybody has to invest in their own home CNC equipment to get started. And we could pull down some of those barriers to entry. So we'll talk a lot more about some shared spaces in just a bit. While we're on technology enabled, you have to realize there's a lot more people using technology to enable their marketing than we even realize. There's product sales platforms like Etsy and Shopify, service platforms like Upwork and Fiverr. And so there are small town people in your town, in fact, who are working part-time or full-time. They're being web designers or writers, programmers, creative artists of all kinds, marketers, consultants, virtual assistants, all these folks using technology to reach bigger markets. So all of the business service platforms and apps also multiply our abilities as entrepreneurs without having to hire help. So probably some of you are using Square right now to take customer payments, or you're using services like Zenefits to handle your HR and benefits. Or you're using a platform like MakeTime from Xometry, which allows you to do manufacturing on demand through an app without having to own equipment yourself. There's things like Indiegogo for crowdfunding that's used primarily by independent artists, Airbnb. All of these tech tools expand what is possible for a rural business today without ever having to do what used to be true, which was if you wanted to go big, you had to move to the big city. So this adds up to a lot of people working from laptops, over phones, working from wherever they happen to be right now. So This past year, we also saw a huge increase in the number of remote jobs that were location independent and could be done from anywhere. And so a lot of people relocated into smaller communities. And I know that in your state, you saw a lot of this as well. So all of those tech-enabled entrepreneurs could use some space to sit down and work outside their homes. This is now becoming so much more available to us as restrictions are eased, that people can't afford to renovate an entire building just to have an office to work in sometimes. So we need to find ways to share offices, and that's co-working. And it's often a not-for-profit, or it can be a for-profit, or even another line of income for business inside a business. Think of all the coffee shops that make workspace available for folks. Now, one of the first successful small town co-working spaces that I heard of was called Veilhoeden, which is in Iowa. It means many hats, but they're in a Dutch settled community, and so they used the Dutch name there. The founder, Joel Bennett, he said, our focus was to provide a space for local small business people and entrepreneurs where they could work and collaborate in an environment that felt more professional than working from the coffee shop, more interactive than only working from your home office, and more interesting than a table at the public library. So that is a great illustration of the way that working together can work, and the way that we can help our technology-enabled entrepreneurs to connect with each other. Now, an essential part of the innovative rural business models is just being okay with temporary experiments. You know, it's all right to try out an idea just for a short time before you commit to something longer term. And a great time for doing these sort of temporary tests is during special events. So shopping events that are held downtown or art walks are perfect for this. Kennett Township and Borough in Pennsylvania, which has a population of about 6,000, they held a successful holiday market of temporary businesses just for one weekend. They borrowed the indoor-outdoor beer garden for their location, which I think was brilliant. They filled it up with 36 temporary businesses, and then they tapped all those vendors to help spread the word and help do the marketing. So of course they were able to reach a lot more people by using everyone's individual networks to reach more folks. And then they counted, and there were about 5,000 extra people that came to town just to visit the market. And the local bricks and mortar stores were extremely happy with that additional traffic. You can also use regular events to help build upon that temporary business model. So you might do a temporary event followed by another temporary event, put them on a regular schedule. And that's what they did in the Pueblo of Zuni in New Mexico. Population about 6,000 folks, pretty spread out. Well, they didn't have very many usable commercial buildings within the Pueblo confines. And so they held a series of public market events on a regular schedule. And that helped support their Native American artists in growing their businesses. And the artists reached a lot more customers together doing these temporary events than they would have each individually on their own. You can do temporary businesses longer than just those 1 or 2 day things. And so Jenny Amy from Southampton in Ontario, which has a population about 3,700, told us how she and an entrepreneurial friend actually rented an empty store for 1 month only. 1 month only. They did upcycled items. She described it as elegant, rustic, practical, and whimsical. She said, we had very positive comments from the building owners, the community, and dozens of people wanting to downsize to move to smaller homes who clearly wanted to get rid of some stuff that could be upcycled. Now, Jenny did not end up opening a permanent business. It was a temporary experiment, but she established that there was a market. And she said at least 2 other people were considering opening consignment shops there in town because of the good results she got. And I see Kelly says Ocracoke Island has festival events almost monthly throughout the year. Restaurants, gift shops, hotels, etc., all benefit from the added traffic. That's a great example. And imagine, your restaurants, a lot of restaurants host things like, a small gift shop or a small retail sales area, or they do their own retail sales there. Gift shops are a natural place to put an additional, take a small space and dedicate that to a separate business that's trying something out, or somebody that makes headbands that needs a space to sell from. Your hotels, also another example of a place where there's more space than is necessarily getting used every second of the day, where additional businesses could be in there temporarily. And Kelly says, food trucks too, natural traveling business companionship right there. So great examples. Thank you very much, Kelly. Now, from that 1 month long business, like Amy talked about, then it's not very far from there to a 6 week long business that could go all the way through the holiday busy shopping season. So Homewood, Illinois, population about 20,000. They had several empty spaces in their downtown as they approached the holidays one year. So their Chamber of Commerce started scouting among local people, looking for people that could try a temporary business that would at least fill a space so it didn't sit empty through the holidays. They ended up filling 7 empty buildings with pop-up retailers and more that went inside of existing businesses, helping them better fill up and look full for the holidays. Rachel Jones, who's their marketing and events director at the time, said, in Homewood, we see our downtown becoming an incubator for new ideas, the perfect place for entrepreneurs to try out new concepts, which I think is a brilliant way to look at your downtown as an incubator where people can try out new concepts. The next one that we are going to look at is the shared spaces. So let me grab that. This example is another one. So when you combine several tiny businesses together in the same space and make it easy to try something temporary, we're making shared spaces. And if there was any single idea I would recommend to almost every single town out there, it is to start dividing up your retail business spaces and all kinds of business spaces. This one that you see here is the Village in Washington, Iowa, population about 7,000. And it was a huge old department store, and so many towns in the few thousand size of population have that old department store still sitting there, not doing very much productive. So the owners of that building really struggled trying to find one big retail tenant who could fill the huge amount of retail space they had. So finally, they came up with this a little innovative thinking. A group of locals took 15,000 square feet of retail space, which is a bunch, and they divided it up into these individual little storefronts that you see facing the inside of the building. So it looks like a little village square inside of this larger building. And each storefront, only a few hundred square feet. So tiny retail businesses can fill up the space and look like they're full. And they also set up, you can see in the center there, a set of push carts and little shelves so that even tinier retail opportunities are there. They even set up some tables in the front space there. So you could start at a table and move up to a push cart or a shelf, and then fill up a tiny storefront, and then maybe graduate to a space of your own in the downtown, which they have seen happen. Now, this is a story of taking small steps. They didn't divide the building into 10 equal spaces. All of these will be the same. They made one fairly big shop. They made several smaller shops. There's the push carts and the tables, so that there's even a one wall store at the very back that was a bookstore initially. So it's just shelves on the wall. And by giving that variety of spaces again, we're making room for everyone to try things out. So keep thinking smaller and smaller until you get down to just one wall. There's an example of these in Bruce Mines, Ontario, that they call the Mariners Cove because it suits their local culture there. They have a population of about 500 people. So this is an idea you can use in quite a small town. So they've broken up this building into separate spaces that are called coves. There's a different business in each one. They have a retail business with antiques and collectibles. There's a massage therapist who also does color and aromatherapy. There's a manicurist, so lots more businesses in there. And the owners, Larry and Pat Peterson, were even kind enough to give a bit of credit to us for confirming this idea could work, even in a town as small as theirs, because we talked about this in one of our videos at Savior.town. And it does work in big cities as well as tiny towns. And so this next story is another one that has a one-wall business. And it's also an example of using this shared spaces model of tiny temporary together as a response to an economic crisis. It comes from Grand Rapids, Michigan, which is a big town, population 188,000. And they have this shared space that's called the Shops at Modiv. And it started with the economic downturn in the late 2000s as an experiment to try to fill that vacant retail space during the downturn, and has proven to be a successful launching pad for retail startups in their downtown. So that retail developer was looking at that big empty retail space that they couldn't find one big tenant for. So they chopped it up. They cut it down into 10 smaller spaces. And they've got some startups and some established retailers who just needed some space downtown. And one artist even rented, yes, a single wall to display her paintings right in the entryway. Now, there may be questions. You may be wondering, I haven't seen it pop up in the chat, but I know some of you are wondering about what are the business specifics of this? You know, who's in charge? But the good news is, of the different examples I've given you, they're all operating on different models. So you can set it up like an antiques mall where there's one owner and one shared checkout stand for the whole space, or more like a shopping mall where you've got individual leases and mostly they run independently. One interesting example, I think, is the Village, which was the one I showed you the photo of. And there, each person, when they sign up to rent a space, they agree to work so many hours at the checkout so that they are helping to run the space as well as put their stuff on display. So I've heard of examples that were successful that were for-profit, not-for-profit, some that were government or quasi-government owned. So it doesn't matter to me which model you use, as long as that you experiment and find the one that works best for you and in your case. We'll pause for a second for a refreshment break. And I'll point out that if you have any questions or you have more examples, feel free to throw those in the chat and be ready to come back for our Thursday mastermind call, because we can go. I'm holding some cool stories for Thursday. I do want to talk about some of the benefits of using shared spaces. There's a study that was done about co-working, but I think it actually explains why shared spaces of all kinds help you to succeed with your business ideas. Emergent Research was the research firm, and they found co-working spaces were much more than just a place to sit down and go to work. They said they are places where members work, network, learn, and socialize together. And the people who were using the co-working spaces told the researchers that they were learning new skills, they were improving their professional success, and they were feeling happier and less lonely in their work. And you can imagine how those positive results apply not just to co-working, but to any of these shared spaces where entrepreneurs get to work together and build connections. Now, our next shared space model that we'll talk about are shared kitchens. So food-based businesses have a lot more restrictions on them than most type of businesses. And that's a big barrier to experimenting with your food business ideas. But if you could just share a health department approved kitchen and preparation space, think about how many commercial kitchens in your town only get used a few hours or maybe just a few days a month. So in Driggs, Idaho, which is a population of about 1,500, there was a group that took a vacant restaurant and they turned it into a kitchen incubator, and they ran this as a 1-year temporary experiment. They partnered with some youth groups that teach kids how to raise and harvest and prepare and sell foods. And so the kids set up to sell at the farmer's market the things they prepared in that kitchen. So that included pesto and quiche and beeswax candles and all kinds of other harvested goods. So what a great way to develop some of their potential entrepreneurs. Now, another kind of shared space that I really love that doesn't get talked about nearly enough are shared workshops. These are your shared space for your makers, your manufacturers, your crafters and craftspeople, working studios, workshops. And think of all the businesses that started in a garage. But what if you don't have a garage? You just need a garage size space. So this size of space, I think, makes a ton of sense. The one you see the picture of is in Twisp, Washington, population 1,500. The organization there is a not-for-profit called Twisp Works, and that is the project. They're converting an old former forest ranger station into spaces for local businesses. So they have multiple buildings all together in one campus setting. And this is their old open front equipment shed where they would just pull trucks and pickups and stuff into the equipment shed and park it. And they were open fronted. So they are converting these into small shop spaces by closing in the fronts, adding the garage doors. And so that's the perfect, start a business in the garage size space, isn't it? They are currently rented. At the time that I went there, the craft entrepreneurs was a blacksmith at the far end. And then there was a conservation birdhouse maker making specialized birdhouses for different species that they were trying to conserve. So what a cool niche business that is. There's another art space that's kind of like this. It's called the Artisans at the Dahlman Barn. And that's near Uniontown, Washington, which is a population of about 300 people. And a local family had donated their old barn. And this is what the Community Development Association did with it. They renovated it. They made a retail store side, but several artisan studios, so that garage size workspace. They also made some classroom space and bathrooms and a kitchen. And they have been so successful, they've had to add a new building next to that barn. So now we're going to shift to the traveling business models. And this is, you've seen food trucks and trailers. I don't have to show you those pictures. But traveling is not just for food, and it's not even just for retail, which I've seen a lot of. It's also an opportunity for service businesses to get out and get around. So these work really well in small towns where there might not be enough critical mass for a single business from a single town. And so they need to get that critical mass by going to more than one town to build their market. And I think this example is perfect. This is dog grooming. It may be tough in a town of, say, 500 to make dog grooming into a profitable business. But if you could cover several small towns in your big blue dog-shaped dog grooming trailer, then you might be able to make a go of it as a business. So I've also seen mobile laser tag, a mobile blade sharpening, so you can get your saw sharpened, or your big trimmers for the garden, and even your knives. I've seen a mobile financial planner that went from town to town. So once you start looking for these, then you realize there are all kinds of mobile businesses. And then that brings us down to combination models. So, we've talked about all these things that include different elements of tiny, keeping the risk small. Most of these are temporary, so that it's something that you could do for a while and then quit if it's not working terribly well. Lots of these are businesses together where you've gained from the critical mass. Even the saw sharpening service I saw, they tend to park at hardware stores where both businesses benefit from that together space. And one of the combination models that I really like is called the Artesian Gallery. It's in Sulphur, Oklahoma. Population is about 5,000 people. This is a project of the Chickasaw Nation. It includes several tiny individual studios for the artists to work in. So everybody's got their own studio space, but they're together. And then there's that gallery space where people can exhibit together. And then there's a community space out front where events can be held and receptions, and we can bring more people there. And there's classroom space for training. And there's shared equipment like pottery kilns that's really expensive for one person to use and leave sitting most of the time. Instead, they can share it amongst lots of artists together. And Mark Mulligan, who is with the Chickasaw Nation, told me that his vision for the Artesian Gallery was a collaborative co-working space, but for artists, or maybe an arts incubator where the artists meet each other, try new things, exchange ideas. So again, it's tiny businesses, temporary. It all works better because they're together, sharing equipment, sharing foot traffic, sharing the promotions. And one benefit to these flexible business models is how they expand opportunity to people who couldn't consider starting a business in that old way with millions of dollars and years of planning up front. Pascagoula, Mississippi, population 22,000, has a beautiful shared retail space called Anchor Square that you see in the picture there. They took an empty lot and then they put a dozen tiny houses in it as tiny business spaces. And so there's this open space in the center where there's room for gatherings. So because all these businesses are together, then that gives that critical mass. It's enough reason for shoppers to come visit. And this is opening more tiny opportunities to entrepreneurs who couldn't work in the traditional manner. Almost a third of Pascagoula's people are African Americans or Puerto Ricans who have faced some extra obstacles and discrimination in starting businesses. In more than 20% of Pascagoula's people have incomes below the poverty level and won't have the resources to start with $1 million business idea. City officials have credited these tiny opportunities at the square have created more wealth for people through entrepreneurship. And that has seeded new businesses that grew into full-size businesses in the downtown space, which is very close to here, just across the tracks. And then they support that pipeline of future businesses by holding the market events like you see here with all the tents and the van, all set up in that open event space in the middle. That gives people a chance to experiment with an entrepreneurial idea at a table or at a booth just for a day or in their regular series. And then, so you could start without very much money at all with a temporary table or booth. You could, if that's successful, you could move up to one of the tiny shops and be there and then keep growing and maybe even grow out to be large enough to fit into a downtown business. So we have a few minutes left, and I would love to have any questions that you have and any stories that you would like to share about tiny, temporary, together, traveling, tech-enabled. And so I'm going to check the chat here. Guess they're quiet in the chat.
Hey, Becky, I'm back.
Okay.
Some great example. One of the ones that struck me, and well, it's a complete, maybe this is a better question for Thursday, but a lot of your examples, and I know we probably get it a lot, is nonprofits leading a lot of addressing the problem of finding the temporary spaces or finding opportunities that would scale for somebody that's particularly small. And I'm trying to wonder where the question is really going, other than to say, how much it's, because it does seem to be something that's a huge answer to the problem, but that most folks don't think of immediately. Is that kind of your experience?
A lot of people that have never been an entrepreneur before still have that idea in their head, right? Of I've got to write a business plan. It's going to, it's going to be a long, hard process. And they're thinking they have to do it all at once, right? Like I've got to buy a building downtown and rehab it. It's going to cost, tons of money. If I start a business, it has to be forever. It's got to make money right away, So people have in their heads a perception of what can be a business. And so by supporting more events where things can be temporary and making it okay to be a business just for a weekend helps to broaden people's perspectives. By taking a large retail building and dividing it into smaller spaces, you're expanding people's thinking of what could qualify as a business. Oh, I could do that. Oh, I could do that. I could do it just for a weekend. I could fill 100 square feet. I couldn't fill 15,000, but I could fill 100, that's 10 by 10. I could do that. So by emphasizing smaller opportunities, the opportunity to do things tiny and temporary and together, the more that we share those stories, more that we make those opportunities available, then the more that people can take advantage of them, and the more that people will see themselves as able to take advantage of them. So things that entrepreneur supporters can do is help support the dividing of buildings, help support the walking into a business and say, would you be willing to rent this one empty wall to somebody? Could we do a one wall business right here? So by asking those enabling questions, you can make it more possible. And the more that people see it, the more they're going to want to do it. So Maggie's asked a great question about the Thursday call, and it is open, and Todd's fixing to put the info right there. And I know you've got it on a slide as well, Todd, if you want to share that. We'll pull that little sucker right back up. Oh, here's the scoop right here. Here's the dial-in number. It's a free conference call thing. There we go. Sort through your slides. I'm going to tease you because I can. There it is.
There we go. I'm sorry the date's wrong, but the information is correct.
Absolutely. And I will go into these more in depth. I'm holding on to some great stories about where you find more potential entrepreneurs. We're going to talk about building the community so that these are successful. And I've got a whole shed load of shed business stories that I cannot wait to talk about when we get together next on Thursday.
I think I can think of plenty of examples, and I know a lot of the ones that are very events oriented are in highly tourism specific areas, but that for those of us in areas that don't have a high area or high amount of tourism, that those either the pop-up opportunities or the almost the flea market style,
Yeah.
which you've been describing, is much more common. So it is something though that both sides can kind of take from it and how they can figure out how to capitalize on it a little bit more.
Absolutely. If you've got a big tourist market, then take advantage of that. And if you don't, then I know that your town still does events for yourselves, right? Like there are local events. There's the local high school homecoming, or there's the local, maybe you do a music event, or I mean, I know that towns that don't have a ton of tourism do this, because I'm sitting in an area with 8 people per square mile in my county. So we don't have a lot of locals. There's 8,000 people, I think, in my entire county. There's 80 cows per square mile, 8 people per square mile. So we've got more cows than people by 10 times. The cows don't buy a lot from us. So we have to be creative. We're also, because we're out in Western Oklahoma, we don't get a lot of visitors. We get a few. We don't have a big interstate coming through that we can draw off of. We have to be a lot more creative. We have far more people who visit friends and family than we have people who showed up because they wanted to view our beautiful natural wonders, which we have. So it's a matter of taking advantage of events that do definitely happen in your community. We've got, I think, 4 minutes maybe left on the clock. I have one story I would share as a closing, if you think that we've got everything ready to go. 11 a.m. Eastern time. That's correct. Yes, Todd?
Yeah. Well, we're done at 12. So yeah.
Okay, right. Thursday's event, the call in starts at 11, same as this. So same time, only Thursday. And don't pay any attention to the date on that slide. I'm just telling you, it's 11 a.m. Eastern. All right. And I'm giving you the last call for questions right here, people.
Questions for the chat. The other thing is we've been working with Deb and Becky that if you're interested, contact your local director. If you'd like to have one-on-one consultation with Becky, part of the funding we've got would go towards that. You have to be in one of the counties, and do have to go through your director. But if you're interested in having time to pick Becky's brain, particularly if you have an idea that relates to this kind of stuff, would be a great opportunity. So
if you've got a business idea, you can't figure out how to do it tiny enough, let me know. I will make up some tiny stories. I really will. All right. I'd love to share. Thank you, I'm going to say your name wrong. Inga. Thank you, Inga, for that compliment. I hope to hear from you on Thursday. And I'd love, Todd, if I could, to share my screen last time to show you a picture of what goes with this story. So this is the story of a one-wall business model. You remember I talked about the one wall, and you may be wondering, does this actually work? Well, Rose Ellis is the artist that I mentioned, who she used to rent a big loft space in the downtown to work and display her art. And it was too much. She couldn't afford to keep it going. So she had to let that go. And she rented one wall in that business, that shared space, to display her paintings. And there's just enough room for her to, squeeze just a little bit of workspace in there so she can work live with an audience. And she was interviewed about what did she think of being in this space? And she said, "You couldn't get me out of here with a crowbar. It's the best business plan I never thought of. It has turned my life around." And that's the importance of the innovative rural business models. We're providing opportunities for people to get started much smaller. And we are putting all of our small businesses, as much as we can, into an environment where they will be more successful. So thank you very much for your attention today. I hope to see you on the call on Thursday, or talk to you on the call on Thursday. And Todd, what else do we need to mention here at the end?
That's about it. I pull up the reminder slide for the link. If I can get it to, sorry, I'm all over.
It's all right. Did I stop? I stopped. Okay.
No,
Make sure I'm not the problem.
You're good. Just for the link for everybody who missed everything after the fact, if they go back to this link, hopefully this is probably where they're finding it. And if not, this is where they will find it. And for all the upcoming information, including the call, is there as well. So we do appreciate everybody, and hope to see you next time. We'll have an announcement. Becky will be back again in August for the new shop local, and we'll do have an announcement here real quick, hopefully, about her July topic. So a lot of good stuff.
All right. Thank you, folks.
Thanks, Becky. See you guys.